Frequently I think to myself, you know what would be cool? If they brought back such and such a game, or they should really try that one cool thing again. You know, the type of stuff we used to play when we were kids. Well, recently, at least here at the Backlog Odyssey, I've been noticing a trend. One that isn't necessarily bringing back exactly what we remember, but new games heavily inspired by our nostalgia. And these games even go as far as being developed with the restrictions and limitations of ancient hardware. You can't see it, but I just did air quotes around that last phrase. However, like the ancient practices of the Mayan civilization, some of these design philosophies might be a little more questionable than we remember. Meaning it's not all sunshine and lollipops, and at times, the result is more misses than hits. Well, the team over at CollectorVision hope to bring visions of Montezuma's revenge to the modern era with Sydney Hunter and the Curse of the Mayan. But will this love letter to the NES and retro games alike be able to shake the old, bad stigma? Being of its ilk, it comes as no surprise that Sydney Hunter and the Curse of the Mayan is an action platformer, but with a bit of a puzzle-solving and collectathon twist, where you'll be controlling the adventurous Sydney Hunter as he whips and boomerangs his way through an ancient Mayan pyramid broken into many dangerous and trap-filled chambers. His goal is to reconstruct the Maya Hob calendar, as well as retrieve a set of powerful idols that have been scattered by the Mayan sun god Kanichahau and his compatriot Kukulkan, a maligned and feathered serpent god. If Sydney is unable to recover these artifacts, then the world's balance will be lost and time as we know it will cease. Now, typically I'd be gushing about the beautiful sprite work and backgrounds, but honestly at this point, unless it goes horribly awry, the NES presentation is kind of given at this point. Not to say that Sydney Hunter looks bad, which it certainly doesn't. In fact, it's quite well done with impressively fluid animations. And my only real sticking point in that regard would be the soundtrack, which has a few catchy tunes but for the most part is a bit grating and forgettable. No, in Sydney Hunter's case, I'd like to focus more on the gameplay and its quirky dialogue. On the dialogue front, its delivery was a bit off-putting. I get that the writers were trying to be funny, but a lot of the jokes just didn't land and weren't all that entertaining. It's like they were attempting to be meme-forward, and it felt forced. Honestly, I cringed every time I interacted with a character, and it kind of ruined the experience for me. The game would have been better off with no dialogue at all, to be perfectly honest. And that's because Sydney Hunter's true appeal is in its gameplay, which definitely lived up to its NES inspirations. The platforming was fun and the controls were responsive. I loved exploring each of the levels looking for hidden skulls and collecting gems, which could be used for upgrades. While playing it, I was reminded of Spelunky if it was more of a straightforward action platformer. The bosses were also satisfying to fight and just the right amount of challenge. There were still some frustrating elements to the gameplay, like insta-death traps, long levels, and irregularly spaced save points. Actually, that's probably the worst part, because when you die, it feels like you lose a lot of progress, which in turn demotivated me from playing more. But then I jumped back in a few hours later after I'd forgotten my loss. But those are just minor gripes, really. In my mind, I think Sydney Hunter and the Curse of the Mayan is a good example of doing the neo-retro thing right. It wasn't perfect, mostly due to following the NES design philosophies too closely in some aspects, but all in all, I enjoyed the game. And if you're looking for a unique pick-up-and-play experience that's reminiscent of a simpler time, then definitely give it a shot. It's available right now on Steam and the Nintendo eShop.